Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is the first video of our Google Cloud series. So let's get started. So in this video, friends, we are not going to jump directly on the console, but we will first discuss very basic thing. If you are someone who just starting into the tech field, or if you just exploring the cloud, video is perfect for you, and this video will give you the solid understanding about cloud or the fundamental why we need a cloud. So let's get started. So to run any application on the internet, the most important thing we require is some sort of infrastructure. And in the other words, we can call that infrastructure as a server. So let's say this is your application, which is news application. Okay. And to run this application, we required something called servers. Okay. Now, if you don't know what is the server, that means server, just consider your laptop example have like certain memory, 16 GB of memory, or 500 GB of storage, and 16 cores, or maybe 7 core, 6 core, whatever. So server is just a bigger version of your computer. That means what? It will be having a more memory, more CPUs, or more capabilities than your personal computer. And it's not just about the resources, it's not just about the CPU and memory storage. In other words, it will be in the term of resiliency as well. That means the motherboard will be designed for the heavy workload, processor will design to do the complex mathematical calculations, and even the storage as well, it is designed to manage high IOPS. That's why we call it server. And in other words, server means it's serving something to user, right? So that's the server, it's serving something. So now this is your applications, and that application running in your servers, and that server is sitting somewhere in the something called data center. It required a facility because it is heavy in the specs, so it required a proper cooling, proper facilities, proper tech care, not like your personal computer that you can easily carry, right? Because it generates the more heat as well. So that's why it required a proper dedicated server room. So that's why usually what organization do, they build something called their own data center, right? Or they build small server room where they can host their server, or they can keep their servers in that room to just make it happy. But server doesn't come as a one box. It also required a other configuration to build the setup. So what is the industry standard setup for any small organization? And in this video, let me show you this. So let's say consider you are organization bbc.com. Now you have a two application, which is news applications and one for the internal employee. So what I'll do, I'll buy one server rack here, right? The rack is nothing but one hard piece of hardware, which look like a cabinet, the big cabinet. And inside that you will put something called firewall. This is for the your security. Then after that you put one switch, and then you put all your servers like this inside your company. Let's consider similar like that. You have 10, 12, 30, 40 servers like this. They will be connecting to this switch, and this switch is connecting to firewall, and your traffic will go outside. So let's say I'm here on the internet, right? I want to access this BBC website, so I have to come all the way like this, and then I will reach like this. Okay, clear? Now the problem with this setup, imagine today you have two application, right? But all of a sudden you realize your organization wants to run 50 new applications because there is a new merger happening, or there is another company which is ready to invest, but they have this thing and they wanted more infrastructure. So all of a sudden you required not the 100 server, not the 50 servers, you required all of a sudden 60 new application you want to run on the same platform. But here is the challenge. Because your infrastructure is already having some workload fix or resource fix, you cannot host more application. So in that case, you required more infrastructure, right? You required more servers, or you required more firewall, more top of rack switch. You required more hardware pieces in your data center. And in some cases, if your data center or server room is small, you need to build another data center. So this is not scalable, right? Also, second thing, this comes with dedicated software or the life cycle. Each hardware has their own dedicated life cycle, maybe 4 year, 5 year, 6 year, and then again you need to replace all this setup with the new version. Similar like that, you will have another upgradation in application. Maybe your application after 3 years or 4 years, 5 year, your application doesn't support the OS version or the hardware version. You require a new hardware. So in lot of situations can come across with this setup, but the main key thing I would say is scalability. The first is we will face the scalability, right? Second, you need to manage the hardwares, right? You require a data center or server room, right? And you required a different silos. Silos means what happens, let's say you have for firewall you required one dedicated guy who know the firewall, how the firewall configuration work. For switch you required a separate guy who knows how the configuration works in switch if any changes required, and you required a server guy. In some cases you will find IT manager managing all this tech, but if your infrastructures grow you require many people to manage this stack. So these are the 3 or 4 common challenges with these facilities. And that's why the cloud in a picture. Now, what is a cloud? Imagine what I will do as a Nishant. I will buy one big building here. Imagine, okay, big server room. In this building, what I will do, I will buy 100 servers a single shot, right? 100, 200, 500, maybe 1000 servers. I'll put in this building and I build the dedicated infrastructure here. The similar like this, but with my own software, with my own firewall and everything. Like usually, because in what happen in on-premise, you'll find multiple vendors as well. So as a firewall, you will find vendor like Cisco, Fortinet and others. For switch, you will find Cisco, Huawei, Aruba. And for server, there are many HP, Dell, Lenovo's, many, and the storage also to put your data. And you require your backup software as well to back up this data, right? And to keep this data in the safe location. So we required a multiple team to managing, the entire stack. Now in public cloud, what happened? Imagine I have big server room here, consider like one of the big building. So I have my own building and inside that I'll buy 200, 300, 500 servers. Okay. And what I did, instead of having the third party firewall, which is from the any third party vendor, I will build my own firewall. Okay, I'll build my own firewall solutions. Though I have options to bring any other vendor here and I can run that, but I will build my own firewall and my own facilities end to end, my own products. I don't depend on HP. I don't depend on Cisco for switches. I don't depend on the FortiGate for firewall. For storage, I don't depend on Dell or anybody, but everything is just from my side. And I'll name it, let's say, my cloud, right? Now what I'll do on top of this, I will build one console because I want other people also to access this and use this, right? Because eventually I want to get my ROI out of this hardware. So what I will do, I will build one software on it which can do multi-tenancy. Multi-tenancy means what? Imagine, you when you have your building, let's say you are owning 100 floor building. So what you do, you have a small flats like 1 BHK, 2 BHK, 3 BHK, whatever, and you give those flats on rent to different people, right? So similar like what you do, I'll have multiple tenant here and I will give them their own dedicated key in many way like username, password or anything. I'll give them that key and they can use this infrastructure and they can pay me based on their usage. If they are, let's say, using for one day, they'll just pay for one day. If they are using for 1 hour, they will just pay for 1 hour. Or if they just created infrastructure, if they are not paying anything, they will not pay anything to me, right? So for this setup, it really makes sense for many people. The reason why, you don't need to buy any hardware, you don't put any headache related to hardware, because eventually what you have, you just manage as a user. You get advantage where you just log in and manage the your console. You don't care about infrastructure. what kind of servers they have, what kind of firewall they have, is it HP, Lenovo. Eventually what I care about something called SLA, service level agreement. Means what? That means I am promising you as a user that this infrastructure will be running 99.99%. I mean, that's the SLA, right? So that means it will be running 24/7 and rarely you will see any downtime there. And plus, at the same time, I also tell you that in case if you want to replicate your data from this data center to another data center, which is on any other region or any other country. So imagine what I will do. Now I have too much money because I'm making money out of this region. So what I will do, I'll create a one setup here, which is considered in US. This maybe I create in UK. Okay. So what I will do, I will now connect one cable from US to UK. And I will tell these guys that guys, if you want your application to replicate on US region, you can replicate from my console only, right? So they don't need to worry about any other configurations or any other hardware investment again. They'll just use the same console, and from the console they do some sort of configuration and their data will be replicated using the backend infrastructure from same platform. Because I already have my connectivity, they just need to use this connectivity and they will pay me. So eventually what is idea here? Let's say somebody is investing his capital and then for you he is converting as operational. So you don't need to invest upfront, but you will pay as you grow. And what you are doing, you are just renting out the infrastructure from there. So in other words, we can call it infrastructure as a service. That's the one term, infrastructure as a service. That means your service provider is responsible for complete infrastructure. There are other terms also, the platform as a service, software as a service, and many other terms which is coming these days. But this is, we call it infrastructure as a service because you are just managing your tenant and whatever you create after in this tenant, like let's say you create a Windows OS on this one, Windows 1 virtual machines. So you are responsible for that operating systems configuration inside it and you will manage the same like you were managing here, but the only you are not responsible for the infrastructure, you are not responsible for hardware. You don't need to manage any life cycle on this. So that means you get the scalability in case if you want 200 servers, you don't need to worry. You just open your tenant and you create a multiples VM or resources. You don't need to worry about how many servers are available in backend or how many firewalls are there. So you don't need to worry if your infrastructure is not predictable. The public cloud is one of the best for you. But if your infrastructure is something or if your requirement is predictable, that means if you know that for 3 years or 4 year span of time you will require this much resources, then private cloud is always cheaper option. But there are other challenges as well which I described or highlighted earlier, which is you need to know what kind of hardware you need, when the hardware is expiring and everything. In private cloud, on public cloud, definitely sometime you will see the customer will complain about the cost, but that's because of the utilizations and related services. In public cloud, you will find out some services which is expensive, some services will be cheap as well. Because when the public cloud start, it was just an infrastructure service. Means they were just responsible for infrastructure and then you were responsible for your application and other related things. But now there is something called platform as a service and software as a service, where what happens, you get your uh, you get your feature ready without preparing OS. Example, one of the example which is serverless. In serverless, what happen, you can just directly take your code and you can run into the services, like example cloud run. So which is from the Google, so you can just run directly your code in that. You don't need to manage even the your server as well. So in that case we call it infrastructure service, and that is fully managed by the Google, and there is a SLA for it or for any other cloud platform. Now we talk about why we always say that these are the hyperscalers, and the reason why is that because you can scale your infrastructure from zero to billions in fraction of seconds. Another advantage, that said, we get three advantage: scalability. We don't need to worry about hardware. We don't need to worry about servers, and there is no multiple silos because everything comes in the single console. Now these facilities being provided by many players. You will see HostGator, you will see Hostinger, you will see many provider. But why there is always three major player that you will often heard? The first is Google, second one is Microsoft, and third one is Amazon. Why these provider are dominating this business offering? And the reason why, first, is amount of services. The amount of services what they're offering, if you see their service offering, you will really get shocked or you will really get amazed. The reason why, they have their own products for each single requirement. Like for storage, they have their own products. For firewalls, they have their own firewalls. For network, they have their own network solutions. Everything available on their console. You will not find those services with any other platform, like compared to Hostinger and all. The second one is services, and third one is their presence. Second one is their presence in the region. Their presence. That means they are globally presence across the globe, and they have their own connectivity as well. So from Google you get GCP. From Microsoft you have Microsoft Azure, and from Amazon you get AWS. And that said, let's jump to our second video where we will sign up into Google account and we will walk through on Google console. Thank you. I hope you liked my video. If you, just like and comment.